May the words of my mouth and thoughts of my heart be acceptable before you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Shalom and welcome all to our Kosher Torah Open Forums. I am, of course, your host, Ariel Tzadok. And at this time, we are right now in a series, different topics, of writings from the famous Gaon of Vilna, Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, and we're learning from his book called Even Shlema, the Complete Stone. The subject in tonight, and most likely our next series, is going to be a next part. I think this is going to be two parts. It's the topic of the redemption. Now, he specifically titles, this is chapter 11 in the book here, and it's dealing with the topic called the mixed multitude. Oh, that's a very interesting topic. The Messianic Travails, and of course, the coming redemption. Now, before we get into the details of what he has to say here, I have to put his take on the coming of Mashiach in a very, very important context. We have, here at KosherTorah.com, dealt with topics of end-time studies, what the fancy term is eschatology, for 20 years. Discussing these things, going all the way. I was on the NBC television programs dealing with these topics. I was on Fox News talking about these topics. I was on the History Channel talking about these topics. Everybody wants to know, what the future holds. And there is so much myth and fantasy and expectation and even desperation that I find that to be extremely dangerous. In the days of the Second Temple, now, if you go into my series of the Talmudic legends, the Ein Yaakov, there's a tremendous section of Messianic prophecies from Tractate Sanhedrin. We covered them all. I have 6 hours on it for you, for those of you who want to go on. And remember, for those of you who make the purchases at the $26 level in our online store, you get a 26% discount. All right, enter code KosherTorah. The topic of the destruction of the Second Temple, also I covered in the Ein Yaakov series. Now, I'm mentioning that for a very important reason. Many people have what I have to consider a dangerous fantasy about the coming of the Messiah. That is, that no matter what we do, God is going to save us. Let's blow up the world because God is going to save us before the pieces fall. Let's throw caution to the wind because God is going to save us. Let's start a war, World War III. Let's launch the nukes. Not a problem. God is going to save us. This was the exact attitude of the extremists in the days of the Second Temple, and why they provoked the civil war with Rome. And as such, we all know the consequences. Okay? They lost that war because God did not intervene. They tried to force the coming of Mashiach. They tried to force the redemption. And there were very bizarre, extraterrestrial, supernatural things happening in the time of the demise of the Second Temple. Read Josephus about the army of chariots that were over the skies. Read about the voices that were heard coming out of the Holy of Holies. Very strange, ominous signs that God was definitely not with the people. And yet, as the Talmud refers to them as the Biryonim, all they did was provoke a war. Now we know the Biryonim also by other names. They were called the Kanaim or the Sikarai. Now you might have heard that name before, specifically in the Christian tradition, where Yeshu was the head of these zealots. Simon Zealotus was one of his 12. Judas Iscariot, a Greek derivative of Sikarai. All right? Yeshu was the head of the rebel, violent insurrection movement in Jerusalem. These are not just my personal conclusions. You'll find that even Christian theologians like S.G.F. Brandon speak about this. Of course, a lot of Christians don't like Professor Brandon. I think he was at Manchester University, a big guy. And they try to disprove, but you can't disprove what is so historically accurate. The original Nazarene Ebionite movement of Jerusalem were these radicals. And it's because of that which caused the political schism, which led to the birth of Christianity and all the rest of it. This is important to understand, because the same spirit of that misguided zealotry is alive and well inside of religious Judaism today. And it is as dangerous today as it was then. The Messiah is not going to come by anybody trying to force the issue. Very clearly it states in both the Talmud, that's the halachic tradition, and in the Zohar, the mystical tradition, the third temple is not destined to be built by human hands. It's meant to come down from heaven, fully built. That's not something mystical, magical, or even spiritual. You want a real modern term? Call it some kind of a mothership. Somehow, somewhere, something from another dimension or another world is going to come. And it's going to bridge an interdimensional, an intergalactic bridge. And the third temple is going to be a bridge, a wormhole, maybe. Something of such a nature. And yeah, that flies in the face of the rationalist tradition. But we're going to see what the Gaon of Vilna has to say about that in a minute. Understand now. The Gaon of Vilna, of course, bases his beliefs and teachings in these matters on Kabbalistic sources. And needless to say, he was not the only one. An earlier contemporary to the Gaon, of course, were the Hasidic masters. Now, of course, the two of them never got along. But there's a teaching of the Ba'al Shem Tov that I actually like. And though I cannot comment on what the Gaon of Vilna would have thought of his Hasidic opponents, nevertheless, I want to open up the teachings of the Gaon of Vilna with the teachings from the Ba'al Shem Tov. Now, I'm going to read to you from this book of Ba'al Shem Tov in Parshat Nitzavim. It's Ot Chet. It says here that, I'm going to paraphrase this for you if you will allow me. It says that each and every person has to rectify and prepare the stature of Mashiach, of the Messiah, that indeed is related to one's own individual soul. It says here that originally Adam, the original Adam, was the collective soul of all humanity. It says that he was stood from one end of the world to the other, and all souls were included within him. And by the power of what we call the sin in Eden, it got lessened. But the soul of the Mashiach is said to be the collective soul of all Israel. And as such, each and every one of us has a spark of the Messiah in us. And it is our obligation then to rectify the spark of the Mashiach, which is related to each and every one of us individually. And that this is how we bring the redemption. In other words, the coming of the Messiah is first a psychological experience within an individual prior to it ever materializing externally as a political, social event. I have somebody asking a question here. Was the Gra, the Gaon of Vilna, of whom we speak, a master of God's name? Meaning, did he understand the powers of the Kabbalah? Of course he did. That's very, very much not even a question. But when I now introduce to you the teachings of the Gaon is going to begin with some ideas, which, again, these things you have to understand within the context of those other classes that I gave you to recognize just how different it is. All the other scenarios are saying this is going to happen first, and this is going to happen second, and this is going to happen third, and this is what you got to look for, these are the signs. The Gaon doesn't give any of that. He is placing emphasis very much as the Ba'al Shem Tov did on inner rectification as the beginning of inner redemption. Now, for those of you who walk the meditative path, the likes of which, of course, I've been teaching for 20 years on Kosher Torah, all the meditative teachings is to teach us specifically this: how to activate that level of psychic, collective, clairvoyant bond with the higher super soul into which we are connected. That's not a theory. That's not a philosophy. That's not even theology. It's something real. Something you do. And of course, everything that I teach is to tell you how to do these things. I don't really care what you believe. I care what you do. And I believe deep within my heart of hearts that that's exactly where God's at too. God knows our heads are full of mush. But our hearts, Rahamana lebabae, is what God looks towards. How we act, what we do. This is why you always hear me yelling and screaming like all the masters of old. From the prophets of the Bible to the sages in Messianic temple and later Talmudic times to the great masters and mystics throughout the centuries. Everybody avoided all the major urban centers and tried to live in the most isolated types of lifestyles. Even the famous Gaon of Vilna, who indeed lived in an urban center in Vilnius, nevertheless led a very introverted and isolated life. He wasn't the man of the party. And yet our society today drags us out of that natural, rural, or introverted setting to rip us away from the inner reality which leads us to the higher truth. Now, the Gaon is going to begin, and he's going to speak like this. That there are eventually, he says, 4 different redemptions, or 4 levels, 4 processes to redemption. And he states like this. In the first one, this happens on Passover. Right? Then we will be redeemed from servitude. On Rosh Hashanah, that is when the real judgment on the enemies of God will be. And then at Shavuot, that's when there will be the ingathering of the exiles by none less than Moses himself. That's an interesting little curiosity there. And then at Sukkot will the temple be built. Now, wait a second. Isn't this order a little bit out of sync? Passover, and then Shavuot. Rosh Hashanah, and then Sukkot. But that's not the order here. You see, the Gaon is not trying to give us a timeline. He is using these as the symbolic metaphors, is what they're meant to be. Now, is it not true that when we do have outworld intervention, that it's supposed to happen at Pesach or Rosh Hashanah, one of these times? It probably will. But which one? How? Everybody thinks that the nature of the Geulah is going to happen, bang, all at once. All of a sudden, there's going to be a big war in Israel, and all the nations are going to surround. We're going to have a 200 million man army around. The nukes are flying. We see them in the sky, and then all of a sudden, poof! You hear Mighty Mouse, Mighty Mashiach, here I come to save the day, and everything. The poof, twinkling magic, everything disappears. All of our enemies burst into flames and die, and they bow down. Oh, we love you, we love you, we love you. And then everybody, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's a fantasy. That's an illusion. That's a delusion. There's nothing like that described in anything, anywhere. And I encourage you, go into the series, the teachings that I have from the book of Zechariah, Daniel. Learn, see these things. I make them available to you. I reveal to you secrets I promise no one else is doing. Learn these things. There are so many secrets about the intervention to come, and it will be otherworldly. And it's not going to be interdimensional as you might think. Oh, they're coming, and when they come, they're going to be rather frightening, and they're going to be rather powerful, and they're coming from a place a lot closer than you might think. And no, I'm not going to get into more details than that because they're irrelevant to here. Go look at the other series. But anyway, the point is, redemption, judgment, gathering of the exiles, building the Beit HaMikdash, this is the order of things. You'll notice which comes first, which comes second, how, what, when. Even Maimonides, the rationalist, says no one knows the details. But these things have to happen. First there has to be psychological freedom. Then there has to be a fundamental transformation in all humanity called the destruction of evil. And only then will there be an enlightenment of who we can ingather as the exiles. Now, who is the promise of redemption for? Don't you dare in a racist way say Jews. Let me tell you something about Jews. Jews comes from the word Judah, and it's only one out of 12 tribes. Where is Dan today? Naphtali, Asher, Zebulun, right? Where are they all? Yosef, Benjamin. You want to go down the list? Shimon and all the rest. Reuben. According to many of the teachings, these will include people who are Native American, Africans, Indians, Afghanistanis, and Chinese. Boy, oh boy, when we find out who the lost tribes are, you're going to find out they're not pasty-skinned white Jews coming out of Poland and Russia. Not by a long shot. So a lot of those arrogant, racist so-and-sos are going to be really surprised when they find who their real landsmen are. And that's the truth. And as for those white pasty types, you might find, as we're about to read, how many of them might not be Jewish after all in the first place. But I'm jumping the gun and we'll get to that in a minute. Matchila. Beginning. Yiga'alu asra shavatim. First has to come the redemption to the 10 tribes. V'harkach shevet Yehuda. And only afterwards the tribe of Judah. V'harkach yichayu dor midbar. And then afterwards is the resurrection of the generation of the wilderness. Now, you have all these things just thrown in here like a kitchen sink. What on earth are we talking about? But this is important to understand. When you recognize that the nature of what redemption is first the psychological transformation. Let's use the right word. The psychological evolution of collective humanity. And change, evolution, growth, fundamentally at the psychological level, as documented in Analytical Psychology by Carl Jung, only comes about through severe psychological trauma and shocks. That's why we go through hell in a handbasket. We learn from it. I don't like it any more than you do, but it's the way God seems to work. That's what we call the Messianic Travails. It's fundamentally meant to transform us. And that is important. So, we're going to find an awakening among the nations. And I see that starting to happen right now. People around the world are not only starting to identify with Israel as a nation, but they're starting to identify with the concepts of what we call universal spirituality. They're coming back to an understanding of fundamental values of righteousness. And we see this collectively. In every culture around the world, there are groups popping up like blossoms on a tree. We don't necessarily see how those trees and branches are connected to the trunk, but nonetheless, they're all fed from the same source. And this is happening right now. This is why we are privileged that an organization like KosherTorah.com exists and can reach out literally around the world through the miracle of? ? The gift of? Definitely. The internet. That right now, as we are speaking live, or those of you listening to this class, are literally on 4 different continents. I can see in my list of people who are here, we have people from North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Israel, all over the world. A few other from other places as well. This is a miracle that we are actually able to communicate live over thousands of miles. And what brought you here? I don't know you. You don't know me. But yes, we do. Because like the Ba'al Shem Tov taught, we're connected. You are here because you belong here. I am here because I belong here. And it's because we mutually support one another we're able to maintain and be here. Oh, that's really deep and spiritual. No, it's just the reality of things. We are making a difference. And as we grow, we blossom that spark of the Messianic redemption to the world. So therefore, we are bringing this redemption. And it's coming to the world. And surprisingly, there is fundamentally a lot more spirituality, a lot more turning to God in the world today, more so in the nations than we see amongst Israel. Just what the Gaon said here would happen. What exactly does it mean then to be this renewal, the revival, the relife of the generation of the wilderness? I guess that's something we're just going to have to see. Is that meant to be taken or understood literally? I'm not so sure. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised if and when, maybe through workings of DNA or something else like that, the bridge is separating the dimensions of what we call life and death, physical or spiritual. Again, all just terms. We discussed this in our previous series about journeys in the afterlife. Souls are conscious entities. Conscious entities exist whether they're in this form or another. Can you imagine if what was going to be, and it will be, when we bridge the dimensional planes, and therefore, like it says, Yivalah hamavet lenetzach, death will be no more, because you can now be in multiple forms simultaneously, consciously, and shift from one to the other, back and forth at will. And therefore, there's no such thing as death anymore. Because if you're not in the physical body, you're in the astral body. What's the big difference? That maybe is how the generation of Moses is to come back. Moses is to come back. There's a lot of interesting talk about Moses. In the commentaries, they question whether it's actually Moses himself or the sons of Moses. The sons of Moses, the Levitical sons, are said to still be alive and well in a place beyond the Sabbaton River. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, go into our Legends of the Talmud, the Ein Yaakov series. Look up the series of Alexander the Great. And the legends of Beyond the Sabbaton. We discussed this there. Yeah, I want you to get the background information. That's why I'm not just giving everything to you on a silver platter. There's just too much to cover in our short times together here. But we must understand, the sons of Moses are still alive. The sons of Tzadok, spoken of in the book of Ezekiel, are very much today practicing in the actual and real temple, which, yes, is still standing to this day. And they have the Ark of the Covenant. No, it's not buried under the Temple Mount. So sorry to all those who believe that. And when the time comes, they will return. And where they will come from? Well, I guess you're going to have to study the Tana de Eliyahu at the end to have a shocking revelation. They're not coming out of heaven. No. They're not coming from another dimension. No. You will see. But this is the redemption of which we speak. An integration, a transformation of the fundamental human character. You can't force this. You can't push this. It requires an evolutionary process. This is what the Gaon is getting at by all these references to Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot. It's not a calendar. It's a process of evolution. How long will it take? That all depends. One of the great Messianic teachings in Tractate Sanhedrin is, one of the great sages met Eliyahu. He says, hey, where's Mashiach? And he goes, oh, he's right over there. I'm, summing it up. So he goes and says, Mashiach, when are you coming? And he goes, today. He goes, really? Cool. And goes back and says, yeah, Eliyahu, he says he's coming today. And Eliyahu says, yes, if only you will hear his voice. If only you will hear his voice. That's the secret of the coming of Mashiach. So I see here in live class, some of us have had a sound problem. Oh, they got the sound back again. Oh, that's what happens. Thank God that's why we got our recording, so you don't miss anything. But anyway, let's move on. Transformations. This is exactly now what the Gaon is saying. Listen. Letter Gimel. The redemption will only come by the power of studying Torah. The Ikar Geula and the essential Geula, the redemption, depends upon the study of Kabbalah. Oh, that gets all the rationalists so bent out of shape. Too bad. But no one understands this. What does it mean to study Torah? What is Torah? I teach about natural Torah. I encourage you to go online to KosherTorah.com, read my essays about natural Torah in Pirkei Avot. Because Torah, going back to the old Midrash, it says that in the beginning God gazed into the Torah and created the universe. Therefore, everything in the universe came forth out of the Torah, which means that everything in the universe has its source in the Torah, which means that everything in the universe is connected to the Torah, which means that you can therefore learn Torah from everything in the universe. When you're sitting in traffic in a traffic jam, you can learn Torah. No, not by listening to an MP3 on your player, but by observing the natural flow of life. You learn Torah by listening to the wind, watching how water flows. Watch and observe the way nature is. The world that God created through the Torah. The Torah is not a book. It is not in a book. It is life. It surrounds us. It imbues us. It's everywhere. This is why when you get out of the clutter, the clatter, which confuses and dazes the mind, you can come back and see the living Torah in everything, everywhere. This and this alone is the true and proper study of Torah. This is the secret of what the Gaon is talking about. When he says, why is the Geula related to studying Kabbalah? Does that mean, we memorized the Zohar, Messiah is going to come? I don't think so. Not at all. Ultimately, what it means is that when you truly know the proper way of living Torah, natural Torah, it transforms you, like the Ba'al Shem Tov says, activating the Messianic spark within your souls. And as that reaches collective mass, that reaches critical mass, we influence the collective consciousness of humanity. We can shift things. What shape and form it will take, whether it's towards apocalypse or transformation, God only knows. But this is what we must do. This is what the study of Kabbalah truly is, and why the Gaon emphasizes it. And listen to what he says next. Dalet. And merit that we distance ourselves from those who study philosophy, theology, and all those types of things. Alright? Philosophy, even he says here natural sciences. Then we will merit God's future light. Why? What? I'm not supposed to be intellectual? No, you're not! The Gaon of Vilna clearly recognized that the rationalist intellectual way, we call Pshat, was clearly the thoughts, processes of what we call the tree of knowledge, good and evil. And that redemption is referred to as the tree of life. We require a fundamental shift and change of how we think as human beings. Today, the way that we need to think is locked in the unconscious. We need to unlock it and make it conscious and live and think and look at the world in such a fundamentally different way. That is what we call emunah, faith. And as the prophet Habakkuk says, the righteous live by their faith. And as the tractate Makot says in the Gemara, that sums up the entire Torah. Fundamental transformation of how we live. I'll give you an example. 30 years ago, I made a decision to dedicate and devote my life to teaching Torah. I threw caution to the wind and I said, somehow, somewhere, I believe that if I do what's right and I devote myself, somehow, somewhere, God will provide. Well, you want to know something? I run a great yeshiva, but I run a lousy business. We are always from hand to mouth, month to month. But you want to know something? With the 20 years since Yeshivat's B'nai Nevi'im has been around, KosherTorah.com, we've lived hand to mouth. We don't have much to show for it. We don't have large amounts of money. We don't have any money. We don't have great possessions. We don't have bank accounts, retirement funds, or anything of the kind. But at the same time, we lack nothing. Because God has provided for us. And today, this class is being given in the PM nighttime hours. At this time, at the night, the close of this day, I can thank God and I will do so in your presence. We have food in our tummies. We have a roof over our heads. We have clothing on our back. We have the warmth, the comfort, the love, the blessing. Tomorrow? I don't know what tomorrow brings any more than you do. But today, I thank God that all my needs are provided. My wants, there are no end to wants. And I pray and I thank God today, right now in front of you, that today I have. And tomorrow I will thank God for what I will have then. Can you live like that? Can you live day to day, trusting, believing in God? That's nature. That's the way nature is. So I was sharing with you earlier, right now, it's a beautiful time here in eastern Tennessee. We're just now having some warm weather coming in. It's springtime here. And our apple trees just started to bloom. And we could recite the blessing of the Birkat Ilanot, the blessing of the new trees. That's today. Is there any guarantee? Do the apple trees have any guarantee that they would blossom and bloom? There's no guarantees. All we have is from God. And therefore we turn to God and supplicate divine mercy. And we open up our hands to receive from heaven with the specific intent and purpose that we can turn around and give what we receive to others. Because that's what God does. Now, I'm not talking to you Musa or anything of the kind. I'm revealing to you the secrets of the coming of Mashiach. Because if we want to really live the Kabbalah, it's not just meditation. Meditation and Kabbalistic sense are a means to an end. Because once you connect with God, once you're standing in front of the Merkavah, once the angels are talking to you, once you get through all the fancy sound and light shows, what's it all about? What's the connection for? It's not to entertain you, but rather to teach you. Lo midrash ha'ikar ela ha'ma'aseh, like it says in Pirkei Avot. It's not the learning, but the doing that counts. God gives to the universe, and if we are to be like God, then we have to give to others. There is no limit to how much we can give. We give of our deeds. We give of our love. We give of our actions. Yeah, you give of your money. Give of whatever. That is how we live. We share. And by we giving, we receive. That is God's way. That is God's promise. And we can live like that. Instead of take. Give. You will see that we can fundamentally transform the world. But when you are thinking and you are philosophizing, even it's interesting that it includes natural sciences. You know what's the problem with the studying natural sciences? People think that natural science is this structured, finite, limited, absolute truth, which it's not. In our homeschooling, where we were studying about plate tectonics today. And the science textbooks say, yeah, the continents are moving at such and such a speed. And we ask, well, could they ever go faster or slower? The answer is, but of course they can. Light, the speed of light is said to be a constant, isn't it? No, it's not. Now I'll share with you a big secret. Well, that which we call the spiritual dimension actually moves at a different speed than we move at. When we would look at the spiritual dimension, it looks like it's standing still. When they look at us, it looks like that we're going 1,000,000 miles an hour. We are out of sync, time-wise. The calculation seems to be 1,000 years to an individual day. So therefore, if I could use such a symbolic statement, God woke up this morning, right? Maimonides was alive. For God, since Maimonides was alive, it's only been, a couple of hours. That's the way heaven looks at time. We have to synchronize the dimensional planes in order to get time to operate and function simultaneously. That only happens through the transformation of consciousness. And when you're limited in what you see or what you are willing to accept, that finite rigidity called din, severity, is what blocks you from seeing a greater experience in a greater world. Now, it says here, the redemption is called by many different names. It's called the morning, it's called birth, because just as the darkest part of the night, it's the period before the dawn, right? And just like with a pregnant woman, the most painful part is right before the delivery. So the exile will be unbearable just before the Geulah. Why? Why is that so? Because, like I shared with you, in the words of Carl Jung in analytical psychology, because to get us to give up the fundamental psychological attachments that we have to this world, of what we think, what we value, these are the things that we have to give up. And most people will not, are not able, unwilling to give up thinking like that. And therefore, God's going to have to tear them away from all of the things that they hold sacred. That is why I am convinced a World War III, a nuclear World War III, is inevitable. Not just because of this or that prophecy, but because people need it. They need to have their old world destroyed so that they can realize that they can survive and move on into a new world. Not a new world order of something enslaving, but rather a redemption. The more that we cling to the old ways, the more we are building up the necessity for its violent destruction, like the pain of giving birth. Alright? Any woman, you know what I'm talking about. But once it pops out, what a difference. This is the way it is. We are coming down to those narrows of the birth passage. We see it in our world. The instability that exists all around us. Troubles in Asia, troubles in the Middle East, all kinds of instabilities, all kinds of government secrets, all kinds of conspiracies, all kinds of dark things going on behind the scenes. If you only knew what was coming down the pike, you'd be scared out of your wits. But that's life. Because there are people in the know who know it's coming. And yet, they only know a portion of it. Now, the Gaon is going to give us some very interesting insights into this. Ot Vav. He says here, Komo shebet tvuna, yesh shlosha min psolet. When we're talking about crops, he gives the example of crops. He says you have 3 types of chaff, or 3 types of refuse. The chaff, the stubble, and the bran. You know, when you take the grains off, you got to, grind them and everything else. Grinding removes the chaff, removes the stubble, removes the bran. So it's that grinding psychologically, socially, economically, that we have to go through in order to clean off the pure grain. So, he says, this is what it's supposed to be like. It says here that Israel are compared to cereal, and, quotes here from Jeremiah, right? You are Reshit Tevuata. You are like the first of my fruits, etc. Now we find that there are, what he calls here, 3 types of refuse, which have to be separated. They are referred to as Yishmael, Esav, and the Erev Rav, otherwise known as the mixed multitude. Now, before we start getting racist here and start talking about Arabs or Christians or anything else of the kind, let's stop that right here in its tracks. Because when our sages used reference terms like Yishmael and Esav, like the Erev Rav, we're not necessarily talking about a group of individuals as much as we're talking about a psychological orientation, an idea and application. So, the Gaon says that these 3 correspond to Abraham and Isaac, from which came forth Esav and Yishmael. Now that's of course according to the biblical understanding. But we must understand that Yishmael and Esav are also psychological archetypes of attachments to this world which we need to separate from. And therefore, corresponding to these 2 natures of separation, we're supposed to have 2 Messiahs. One is called Mashiach of Yosef, and the other is called Mashiach of David. Now, we know Mashiach ben David from Scripture. He's the son of David, he's the eternal ruler, etc., and so on. It's only in the Talmudic tradition that we learn about Ben Yosef. Now, what is the purpose of these 2? The Gaon especially brings down and emphasizes these teachings right out of the teachings of the Ariel. I have a very extended essay on the identity and purpose of Mashiach ben Yosef on KosherTorah.com. If you go to our essays page on eschatology, end times study, and scroll down there towards the bottom, you'll see an article called Mashiach ben Yosef, Purpose and Identity. Or you can just use the search engine on KosherTorah. I'm sure you'll find it. It's right there. And I endeavor to help you understand that when we speak of Mashiach ben Yosef, and possibly even Mashiach ben David, we might not necessarily be referring to an individual, literally, but to something more archetypally, even as Esav, Yishmael, and the Erev Rav are archetypes. And as such, the 2 Mashiachim come to sift from us the 2 archetypal husks or shells called Esav and Yishmael. And it says here, V'hem yivareru et Yisrael memotz v'teven. That these 2 Mashiachs are then going to come to remove from us the refuse of the chaff and the stubble. V'yuke motz lifnei ruach. And they will then be like the chaff before the Spirit. You know, when you winnow grain, you throw it up and all the chaff just blows away. Right? It says then that the house of Esav will be like kash, dry straw. Right? But still, the rectification, the refinement necessary will not be complete until we have first rectified and gotten rid of this mixed multitude, this Erev Rav, which corresponds to the last level of the refuge called here the bran. They, or I should say bran is what really clings to the source of the wheat. It's very, very close to it. It requires a lot of effort to break it. So it says that this refuge, this corresponds to Jacob. Alright? And he says here, this corresponds to not studying Torah and removing from ourselves the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. Now, Not studying Torah, as we're going to see, is not to be interpreted as not reading books. On the contrary, it's not being in touch with the natural living Torah like I've been describing. This is called removing from ourselves the yoke of heaven. Heaven and earth are like husband and wife, the Holy One, blessed be He, in the Shekhinah. And therefore, these are the two lobes of the brain, right brain, left brain, conscious, unconscious, physical, spiritual, body, soul, all the rest of all the metaphors. And when we detach one from the other by living in a rationalist, left brain world, we detach ourselves from reality. And therefore, we are subject to and embrace and are living the archetype of what we call the mixed multitude, the Erev Rav. It says here, Hem dibukim ma'od b'Yisrael. This, he says, they are very much clinging to Israel, and Israel learns from their deeds, meaning to act, to think in this way. And it says here, V'hem ma'ashrim al yedei gavatech. They make themselves wealthy through their pride. And therefore, against them it says, the son of David, quoting Masechet Sanhedrin, son of David will not come until all the proud spirits will be removed. Now, how is that? People who take pride in the arrogance of their Aryanite intellect, this fundamentally has to change. We have to get back to the natural way. And when I talk the natural way, you'll find that's the rationalist and the intellect. Nonsense, garbage, blah, blah, blah. Just sit down and memorize some more mishtayot and learn this and learn that and remember the books. I say to them, no. Halacha, of course, you have to know, especially if you're a Rav. But for a Baal Bait, you have to know living Torah. When you study Torah, it's not enough that you read words in a book. You have to recognize the words in the book on the pages of creation all around you. This is why we have the meditative teachings that we teach here at KosherTorah. So is that the inner reality becomes the outer reality, and the outer reality becomes the inner reality. And you merge and become one, therefore making the rectification. Anything else like that is here called the Erev Rav. So he states here, the only way you remove this bran is to grind the wheat really, really well, to sift it and move it out. The only way we remove this mixed multitude from us is by the difficulties we experience in exile. So who are these mixed multitudes of who we speak? The Zohar identifies them. And you'll find, as the Gaon of Vilna is about to do, but I'll read to you from the commentary first. There are 5 levels that are referred to as the mixed multitude. The mixed multitude are given the names. This is actually right out of the Zohar. They're called Nephilim, the fallen ones. Giborim, the mighty ones. Amalekim, Amalek. The Rephaim, and the Anakim, great ones. So, the Nephilim, the fallen ones, these are those who run after their desires, like the Nephilim we read about in the book of Genesis. The Giborim, the mighty ones, these are men who have great names. These are the ones who build for themselves synagogues, and they donate all kinds of things for the Sefer Torah, but they don't do this for the love of God. They do it so they are, can have a proud name, so people look up to them and say, wow, you're so great. That's why I'm very much against the modern tradition of putting names. This is dedicated by this one, this is dedicated by that one. This is the way of the Erev Rav. This is the way that introduces pride as opposed to humility. Now you might say, well, we don't do that, no one's going to donate. Oh really? I'd rather not have those donations. And if I have to do without, well, you know something, I'll deal with it and God will be with me. Maybe that's why I'm poor and they're rich. But am I really poor? Are they really rich? If you're going to look at the size of the bank accounts and Chase Manhattan and at Citibank, well, maybe they're rich. If you look at the Bank of Heaven, I'll bank my account next to theirs any day. Next, the Giborim. Oh, we just said the Giborim. Amalek. We all know Amalek, the ultimate arch enemy of Israel. He states here, these are the heads of Israel in the exile. They are the vessels of violence. They are the ones who steal from the poor of Israel. Alright? And they are the ones who rise to the head. These are the most dangerous of all enemies, the thieves, who steal the spiritual values. The Rephaim, they're the ones who try to make themselves look important and honored by giving tzedakah and taking care of the poor. Why? Not for the sake of helping people, but for looking good. And the Anakim, the great ones, these are the ones who show disrespect for Torah scholars. And then you have the arrogant and the wicked in each and every generation. He says these are the ones in every generation who are the mixed multitude. The spirit of the children of Cain. So the mixed multitude, historically, were the many, many people who joined the Jewish people when they left Egypt. Now, when we use the terms today, mixed multitude, Erev Rav, or Yishmael, or Esav, we're not talking about a bloodline group of people. We're talking about psychological elements of personalities and behaviors which identify people and their psychological aberrations. And that is what must need be removed before Mashiach can come. That's why God orchestrates all of the troubles and adversities in the world, so that we are forced to change. That is what this is all about. Now he gives us some very wise advice here in Ot Zayin. Lefisha dorot mitma'atim. Being that from generation to generation, he says here we're growing less. We're growing less and less in consciousness. We're growing further and further away from a natural path. We're growing dumber. There's actually scientific evidence to say that mankind, humanity, is growing dumber. The more evolved we become in our technological contraptions, the more urbanized we become, the stupider we become as people, the dumber we become. The more removed and detached from nature we become. This is no coincidence. What do you think God's going to do about it? He's going to take away all those things that keep us separate from Him. It's a favor that He's doing us. Even though I'm sure you're not going to like the collapse of urban society. Western civilization, Eastern civilization, everything that we know. But it has to be. Because we are growing less and less. And the Erev Rav and their mentality is growing stronger and stronger. It says here, therefore, the sages of each and every generation have to add gezerot, edicts, different types of Torah regulations to protect us from all the assaults and violations that the Erev Rav deal upon us. So who are the Erev Rav today? Well, it all depends who you ask. I know certain Ashkenazim who will say the Sephardim are. I know certain Sephardim will say Ashkenazim are. I know certain religious who will say the secular are. And I know certain secular point to certain anti-Zionist religious are. And everybody's pointing a finger at everybody else. Well, I'm going to tell you. It's usually the finger pointers that need to turn the finger around and be pointing at themselves. Because when people start to finger point, you should be curious about that. Even suspicious. Our psychological transformation to become Messianic souls requires of us a psychological transformation. The 5 types of Erev Rav that are in Israel, not amongst the nations. Don't point a finger and say, oh, Gaon. Start talking that racist garbage. You're the Erev Rav. 5 types the Gaon says here. Oh, the het. Those who create strife and speak slander. Is that really limited to any group? You can say, look at those black hatters. Yeah, they speak slander and they cause strife. Yeah, but think they're the only ones? Let's be honest. Ba'alei ta'ava. Those who follow their lusts. Well, look at this one and that one. Pedophilia and all the rest. Yeah, but which group? has a monopoly on that. Hatzibuim, hypocrites, she'ein tocham kegevaram, who are externally one way but internally another. Go ahead. Which group has a monopoly on that? 4. Harodafim achar hakavod, lasot lem shem, those who pursue honor, so that they will be, they'll have a name for themselves, a reputation. How many? Who? Who is this? Harodafim achar mamon, and those who pursue only money. Those are your 5 types of the Erev Rav. And as you can see, there's a psychological components. And again, the Gaon of Vilna, unlike all the other Messianic prophecies, it's not giving us calendars and dates. It's not identifying external enemies who we beat up with a gun or a sword. Like the Ba'al Shem Tov, surprisingly, he's referring to the inner enemies that need to be beaten out of all of us. And that's why, when I come to look at the ideas of a Mashiach ben Yosef and a ben David, yes, I will recognize them within a historical, political context. But I also recognize them within a psychological context within each and every one of us as well, like the Gaon said, like the Ba'al Shem Tov said as well. And indeed, the Gaon of Vilna, if you remember, earlier taught us about the importance of studying Kabbalah as a transformational system to bring us to redemption. The Ba'al Shem Tov echoed those words. And again, quoting from Sefer Ba'al Shem Tov, Parsha Ve'et Hanan, letter 67, he says, in this time and age, we call this the age of the Messianic Travails, the generation before the coming of the Messiah. The Ariel referred to that. His time in the 1570s was the generation before the Messiah. The Ba'al Shem Tov referred to it in the 1700s. Boy, that's a long generation. It's been on 400 years. But I told you, time is measured differently. It's a psychological epoch, not one that is measured on a calendar. It says, in this time, it is a mitzvah, a commandment, to reveal the secrets of the Torah and the supernal secrets, so that we can remove what's called the thorns from the garden. In other words, to help heal the mind, to help cure and purify the psychological way. And in letter 69, an example I teach all the time, that there was a man teaching Kabbalah publicly, and the Ba'al Shem Tov said, "Shush, forbidden for you to teach." The man surprisingly said, "Ba'al Shem Tov, but you teach Kabbalah all the time." To which he says, "Yes, but I don't teach people that the Kabbalah is about the worlds up there on the other side of the rainbow. I teach them about the worlds inside of ourselves. And you're teaching them otherwise, and therefore you're teaching them wrong. And that's why I follow this path, that with God's help, to teach you right. You, as the individual listening to me right now, I don't care if you're listening live, if you're listening to this recording, I don't care if you have it on a CD, you're listening on a computer, and you're driving in your car. You have the power to change the world right this very moment with a simple projection of your mind. By projecting a thought to the world, you can change the world with acts of random kindness. You can change the world by looking at the world and asking, what is the significance of this external to something internal within me? Integrating internal and external. That is called the unity of the Holy One, blessed be He, and the Shekhinah. This is how we activate the spirit of the Mashiach within us. By staying away from argument and strife, staying away from lust, staying away from hypocrisy, staying away from arrogance and pride, and making money the absolute financial, the absolute decision of everything. No. But then the Gaon says here, Bali Machloket, those who cause strife and argument, they're the worst of them all. They are called Amalek. And we know that the son of David cannot come until we remove all Amalek from the world. And we're taught that all Machloket, disagreement that's for the sake of heaven, okay, that will substantiate, because when we have an honest and sincere disagreement, that's okay. But argument and sake that's not for the sake of heaven, that is Amalek. That is the Erev Rav. That is what must be removed. And you see so much fighting, anger, bitterness, evil today. We can't necessarily change the world, but we still will give to the world, because we will not be a part of that. We will take the high road. We will be better. And as irrational and crazy, maybe even as irresponsible as it sounds, we will do the right thing simply because it is the right thing. And trust in God that somehow, some way, that which is natural and that which is supernatural will come together and create for us our path, step by step. So though I stand today in my place, and I cast out my foot to take the next step, but I don't see the road ahead of me, by the time my foot lands, it's firmly on firm ground. And that is how I've learned to live and walk. And what I need to teach you, because the time is coming when all that which we put security, that which we cling to, is going to be gone. It's going to be removed. You're going to think, oh, what a tragedy, what a terrible thing. But no, it's by the hand of God. It is what has been ordained. There is a time and there is a purpose for all things under heaven. And the ways and means and nature of the time is what we're going to pick up with and discuss in our next class. We're going to have to understand what Kohelet teaches. We're going to have to understand the ways and nature of times, the days, the epochs, the movement of things. And when you are naturally in tune with this, you're as if you have your pulse on the flow of nature, the flow of divine energy in the world. And therefore you can see the natural wave function, which is the flow of living Torah, otherwise called the Tree of Life. To be continued in our next part 2 of this series. Thank you all for joining me. Please come take advantage of the materials we have available for you at KosherTorah.com. Please remember to support us. Please remember to shop Amazon.com through the links on KosherTorah.com to help support us. I'm here for you. You are here for me. That is how we live the message that we're sharing now. Thank you again all for joining me. I'm your host, Ariel Bar Tzadok. See you online at KosherTorah.com. Shalom. 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 See you online at KosherTorah.com. Shalom.